Welcome back to New Rockstars, I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of House of the Dragon Episode 4, in which this series defies Game of Thrones tradition of normalizing incest by, wow. But did it actually happen in this story told by unreliable narrators? Yeah, kinda. But does that even matter if the Maesters hook you up with that good old plan T? Let's do what we do here at New Rockstars and go deeper into the visuals than anyone else cares to, and expose the deeper layers of meaning that you might have overlooked in this episode. Starting with a very easy to miss update to the opening title sequence, the bloodline around Alicent's dial, which last week was updated to now meet Viserys' bloodline, now in episode 4 branches downward, but doesn't yet touch the dial below. The opening shot shows the Valyrian steel necklace that Daemon gave Rhaenyra, the symbol that's been on Rhaenyra's dial, and notice how she fondles it, foreshadowing the suitor that she really wants to fondle this episode. Ugh, I'm sorry. Other suitors line up to propose to Rhaenyra. We see one from House Frey, that's a sigil of the twins. There's a House Tully fish behind him, and then House Strong. Meanwhile, the old man speaking, according to the captions, is named Barrick Dondarrion, who of course is not the Lightning Lord from Game of Thrones era, but this earlier Lord Dondarrion says,
All Blackhaven are unscalable battlestones. The castle is surrounded by a deep, dry moat. It is well fortified against any future Dornish incursions.
Yes, Blackhaven is the home of House Dondarrion in the Stormlands to the west, where Dornish incursions would be a big issue. Actually, this is likely the same Lord Dondarrion to whom Sir Criston Cole's father served as steward. This was before Criston fought in some of those Dornish incursions. That rumble of thunder that we hear tells us that we are at Storm's End, the home of House Baratheon. Actually, that's Lord Boremund Baratheon, sigil of the stag, seated beside Rhaenyra. The Baratheons and Targaryens at this point in history are pretty good friends, with Lord Orys Baratheon becoming the hand to Aegon the Conqueror. The young Lord Blackwood's collar shows two ravens. Actually, that house's sigil is a flock of ravens surrounding a dead weirwood tree. He says his house descends from the First Men, the First Men being one of the three ethnic groups from whom Westeros humans descended along with the Rhoynar and the Andals. The First Men formed the pact with the Children of the Forest and adopted the Children of the Forest's old gods, thus the weirwood tree in the Blackwood sigil. Lord Blackwood claims that his family helped Aegon the Conqueror, referring to House Blackwood siding with Aegon when he torched Harrenhal and conquered the Riverlands. As we saw in the series opening scene, 'twas Dragonfire that killed this beast, so yeah, young Lord Blackwood is trying to ride some coattails. And bullying him is Lord Bracken. Notice the red stallion of House Bracken. The Blackwoods and the Brackens have long hated each other. Actually, in the text, Samwell Blackwood and Amos Bracken duel for Rhaenyra's affection, but during her visit to the Trident. Turns out this Blackwood is not Samwell Blackwood. HBO confirmed it is Willem Blackwood. And I think they changed the setting of this duel because they wanted to establish Storm's End as an important location for major events later in the series. And for all you book readers out there, it does make us wonder, will fated duels at Storm's End go down the same way in this series as they do in the book? But that's a question for like season 3. Anyway, Blackwood totally defeats Bracken here, so points on the board for the blood of the First Men. Just an interesting recurring theme on the series so far, that indigenous Westerosi virtues, weirwood trees, the White Hart, First Men bloodlines seem to bear more strength than the currently more valued virtues like dragons and Valyrian blood. There's probably some metaphor here in invaders, colonialism, and imperialism, but I'll let you draw those conclusions. A little detail I love, as Bracken spews up blood, little Blackwood takes in his first kill and he looks like he's about to vomit. Don't worry, kid, I often feel the same way. Oh, by the way, Epic Hero merch is a new shirt, Ash in Ruin, which you can get at EpicHeroShop.com. Caraxes shoulder checks the boat. You can actually spot Daemon riding on Caraxes' back there, so he did this on purpose, and Rhaenyra smiles as if to say, challenge accepted, uncle. Ugh. We see a close-up of Viserys' crown, underlying the significance of crowns in this setting, and how wearing anything resembling a crown is an affront to the monarch. Viserys dons this and carries Blackfire, the Valyrian steel sword of Aegon the Conqueror. Rhaenyra enters with this eager crowd, and notice how she tries to hide herself behind the onlookers, but Viserys does notice her arrival. We see the moment he frowns, because yeah, Rhaenyra still had another 2 months on this suitor tour that he spent all this time arranging for her. Daemon enters the room for the first time since he was banished in episode 1 with shorter hair and a crown made of wood, carrying the hammer of Kragus the Crabfeeder. Rhaenyra follows him through the crowd as he approaches the king, setting up her following this Pied Piper uncle throughout this episode. But Daemon offers the hammer to Viserys.
Add it to the chair.
The Iron Throne is of course composed of weapons wielded against the Targaryens, but in a way this is also a kind of insult to Viserys, as this hammer would be a more blunt instrument, less likely to cut the Cursed King than all the swords he keeps cutting himself on. And at first, Daemon keeps them guessing in his loyalty.
Once we smash the Triarchy, they name me King of the Narrow Sea. But I know that there is only one true king, Your Grace.
But Daemon ultimately offers Viserys' crown, as if it's a meaningless honorary thing that was given to him by others, but notice that massive ruby wired to the front of the crown. Targaryens regularly adorn their pieces with rubies. Rubies on Rhaenyra's necklace, rubies on the Conqueror's crown. So Daemon clearly made this crown himself in the fashion of the Conqueror, the crown that Viserys said was in his dream. So this is a total power move by Daemon. It's meant to insult Viserys, but Viserys lets it go and hugs his brother, and notice how the bottom two glove fingers, again, fold emptily. Just another example of Paddy Considine doing some limp glove work to show how his ring and pinky fingers have withered off. In the garden, Alicent suggests,
perhaps Prince Daemon would care for a tour of the gallery. He hasn't yet seen the new tapestries gifted to you by Norvos and Qohor.
Norvos and Qohor are the two inland free cities of Essos, meaning they weren't part of that maritime triarchy and likely wanted to curry favor with the crown to separate them from Mir, Lys, and Tyrosh. I actually wonder if Norvos and Qohor could be the ones supplying those horny bestiality tapestries that covered the Red Keep. Rhaenyra and Daemon discuss royal marriages for men versus women and bring up Daemon's current wife, Rhea Royce, in the Vale.
No. No, che se creni un tenko, totaluti ombriago rus na jumban.
Despite Daemon's reputation as a womanizer, this series has so far only ever shown him as impotent. It was not working with Mysaria in episode 1, he lied about her being pregnant in episode 2, Rhea Royce is without child, and he struggles with Rhaenyra in this episode. So is Daemon's impotency a temporary obstacle that he's meant to overcome in the series, or a tragic curse that he's destined to doom himself on in a series of bad choices? In this scene, Daemon seems to suggest it's the latter. Rhaenyra's chat with Alicent earlier about being trapped in a castle with screaming children, having to squeeze out more children, is shown in the middle part of this episode. Meanwhile, with Rhaenyra, the girl goes wild. Starting with Daemon's note to Rhaenyra, written in High Valyrian. This is a written form of this language, developed by the linguists of this series and of Game of Thrones, David J. Peterson, the guy who also came up with the ins and outs of Dothraki. And while he based the spoken language of Valyrian partly on Latin, when it comes to the written form, he went in a different direction. Because notice how, unlike English writing, which uses a glyph for each consonant and vowel, High Valyrian is a logographic system in which a single glyph can represent an entire word. At a recent expo, Peterson actually said they developed 365 unique glyphs for this series. Now, I do not know all 365 of those glyphs, but by looking at Peterson's Instagram posts, it looks like the third and fourth line of this note that Daemon wrote Rhaenyra have part of his glyph for the word brick, which is likely an instruction to push a specific brick to open the secret passageway. And yes, I have been pointing out how Daemon is the master of sneaks, who knows all the secret passageways that his ancestor, Maegor the Cruel, had constructed in the Red Keep, and then killed off all the construction workers to keep that secret. And now, according to this drawing, this passageway opens up in Rhaenyra's bedroom right beside her bed. And if your uncle telling you that is not creepy to you, I don't know what will be. So Rhaenyra passes through the basement containing the skull of Balerion, the Black Dread. A close-up of its teeth shows some mice nibbling, showing how various sets of eyes are going to be on Rhaenyra tonight that she is not aware of. Actually, later, Alicent sees a mouse on the bedpost, signaling that these passages from the royal quarters to the tunnels below are open and she's missing out on the fun. Daemon and Rhaenyra stroll through the city, intercut with these shots of a burst of flames from a metal dragon head. This is the one that's actually used in the alley that leads to the corner where the mummers are doing their play. Rhaenyra passes a blind woman who offers to tell her death. To Rhaenyra, this woman would be the literal form of the crone, one of the seven. And when you pair this with all these recurring shots of dragon fire, I don't know, that might be part of Rhaenyra's future. We get this moment with Viserys and Alicent at the bath, an interesting parallel with Viserys and Aemma at the bath. The bath precedes the fall, because notice here he has cuts and wounds all over his arms and shoulders and back, likely each of them different cuts from the swords of the Iron Throne. When Viserys later makes her join him in his chamber, we see his entire back, and it's now covered in festering scabs. So I stare at screens all day, and that can be tough on my eyes. It used to be the case that I'd help my eyes out by wearing a pair of Blue Blocks blue light glasses, but Blue Blocks has now become Bon Charge. Thankfully, the glasses stayed the same. Bon Charge is a couple different glasses depending on what you need. My go-to are the computer glasses. They help reduce sore eyes, headaches, watery eyes, and fatigue. If I'm staring at a computer all day, or if I'm in a room with fluorescent lights, these glasses are my first line of defense. Bon Charge's glasses are backed by science and tested to make sure they work, which is not the case with other light blocking glasses on the market. If you've got a prescription, you can get these with a prescription. If you don't, you can still get these without a prescription. If you just need a pair of light blocking reading glasses, Bon Charge can handle that too. Bon Charge ships worldwide and have other great products like low blue light bulbs, red light therapy devices, and 100% light blocking sleep masks. Go to boncharge.com/newrockstars and use coupon code newrockstars to save 20%. That's BONCHARGE.com/newrockstars and use the coupon code newrockstars to save 20%. Rhaenyra and Daemon watch this play satirizing their current royal succession drama. The Daemon actor is mostly shown in the background of the scene, reacting. The way Daemon in the series is lurked in the shadows, saying very little. And you'll notice how all the actors are male, which was the tradition in real-world Elizabethan times, but a contrast with the mummers that we meet in Game of Thrones 200 years later in Essos, the city of Braavos, the troupe that includes the actress Lady Crane. Rhaenyra mirrors Arya Stark a lot in this episode, dressing as a boy and sneaking out of the Red Keep through the same tunnels that Arya did. And like Arya, when she saw that mummers play in Braavos, this highborn lady is learning the oversimplified truth of how the common folks see all this royal drama. It's not exactly what they'd expect. As she runs, Rhaenyra runs into the captain of the City Watch, Sir Harwin Strong.
Sir Harwin.
Princess.
Don't.
You take care, boy. Next time you might not be so lucky.
You remember Sir Harwin? He joined the hunt in episode 3 and gave Rhaenyra that approving grin when she returned with the slain boar. Now, in her private quarters, the bed that Alicent sleeps in is the literal same bed and headboard of the bed that Queen Aemma died in. Now, it's understandable that Alicent would have the same room, but they couldn't change out the bed? Come on, why would you do that to Alicent? Now, thanks to YouTube, we won't be showing or really describing most of the sexual imagery in the brothel sequence, but director Claire Kilner did describe how she tried to shoot the sex scenes of this episode from Rhaenyra's point of view, as opposed to from the male point of view, which traditionally is how a lot of sex scenes have been shot. So you'll notice as this intercuts with Alicent, we actually spend most of the runtime on close-up reactions from Rhaenyra and Alicent, and they're contrasting excited and bored expressions. The sex that both of them are experiencing is really framed through the way they're emotionally processing it. But really, including Rhaenyra and Daemon's hookup at all in this show is hugely important, because it lends a bit of objectivity to something that was, in the text, presented as unreliable gossip from the account of a mummer named Mushroom. But notice how this scene is shot with hardly any lighting and really a lack of clarity over how far exactly it goes downstairs. Like if you rewatch the scene yourself, not here, you'll notice that Daemon does lower Rhaenyra's trousers, he presses himself against her, but there's no like thrusting. And soon after that, she just turns around and takes the reins in her advances. And that's when Daemon totally disengages. So it's tough to watch this scene at first glance, and well, it's actually just tough to watch it, period. Ugh. But it is difficult to watch this scene once and come out of it with a clear understanding of how far these two actually went. Therefore, in the context of this brothel, any witness to this hookup couldn't truly testify with certainty over how far it went either. So that way, this series, you could say, maintains the unreliable narrator element from the book. All we know is that this uncle and niece definitely went too far, but that only the two of them actually know how far it really went, and that afterward, each of them made separate decisions on how to recount that truth to others. I feel like I'm gonna get a lot of emails yelling at me for that one. I'm just saying, I don't think anyone who watched that scene for the first time could look at that horrible lighting and say, I know exactly what happened there. Now we see this shaggy-haired boy outside who follows Rhaenyra. He was likely also among those peepers on Daemon and Mysaria in episode 1, part of the network who reported to Otto that Daemon called Balon heir for a day, something that we also did not see Daemon objectively saying on screen, but he took credit for anyway. Rhaenyra goes home and seduces Sir Criston, which is also an alteration from the unreliable account that's in the book, which claims that Daemon coached Rhaenyra into seducing Sir Criston. But here, it is fully Rhaenyra's own choice. And that's proven with, I think, my favorite detail of this episode. The next morning after sleeping with Sir Criston, and for the rest of the episode, notice how Rhaenyra has now switched out of the Valyrian steel necklace that Daemon gave her, the one that she was touching in the opening shot. Now she shelves that necklace and has reverted to a simpler golden necklace because she no longer needs Daemon to have power in this episode. Now Otto meets with that shaggy-haired boy, whom we learn is a messenger from someone called the White Worm, and this same boy in the next scene passes money to Mysaria, and she is dressed in a slender white gown. So it is confirmed, Mysaria is the White Worm, Otto's primary contact, who has been passing Otto intel on Daemon with the help of these child spies. Like Varys and like Qyburn, she has the League of Little Birds, which makes sense because this character will go on to become a Master of Whisperers. I like this shot where Daemon's blindness to her is reflected with the blinding sunlight behind Mysaria as she hands him the hangover tea. Now, despite all this, we still do not know if Mysaria's reports are objectively true or just some salacious gossip that paints Daemon in a scandalous light, and Daemon just doesn't deny any of it. Actually, one could argue that Daemon knows Mysaria is feeding this gossip to Otto and allows it to happen, knowing that Otto will spill this tea to Viserys, embarrassing the king and forcing Otto to admit that he is using spies, which makes him look pretty bad, which would ultimately force Viserys to choose between his hand and his brother, which Daemon might have plotted to remove both himself and Otto as morally corrupt equals. Really, it comes down to how smart do we think Daemon is? I don't know, he may just be a self-destructive prat, but I just love the way Matt Smith plays this with such cryptic cryptic glances, very few words, and the way this character is written to just own up to the things that would hurt his brother the most. Otto mentions the Hour of the Owl, calling back the Dragon Keeper's reference to the Hour of the Bat in episode 2. So the hours through the night go after sunset, the Hour of the Bat, then the Hour of the Eel, then the Hour of Ghosts, then the Hour of the Owl, then the Hour of the Wolf, and then the Hour of the Nightingale. So in the Godswood, this scene with Rhaenyra and Alicent, my favorite scene of the episode, because Rhaenyra responds perfectly to the accusation. She admits to drinking and to partying with Daemon, but when it comes to having sex with him, she feigns disgust.
This is a vile accusation.
Is it? You Targaryens do have queer customs. And Daemon certainly knows no limit.
Alicent, your Grace, sister, you must know I would never. You cannot believe such gossip.
I love the contrasting communication compared to these two in the previous episode, because in episode 3, Rhaenyra cold-shouldered the queen in the same location, but now Rhaenyra comes to her, appealing to her by name, and then by her formal title, Your Grace, and then through their sisterhood companionship. And as Rhaenyra did when she was making out with her uncle, she so deftly shifts, first from the defensive, but then to the aggressor.
My father is no gossip.
Well, certainly he's been misled. He could not have witnessed such a thing.
Why not?
Because it did not happen.
He was told. That you...
And Rhaenyra catches Alicent for basing this on an anonymous third-person account, one that Alicent was not even supposed to hear. She was eavesdropping, dropping eaves! So Rhaenyra, knowing she has her, crosses behind her, closer to the judging stare of the eyes of the weirwood tree. She is literally on the higher ground now, like a judge in a courtroom. In this way, if you think about it, Rhaenyra also avoids having to herself look into the eyes of the weirwood tree, because she is totally lying through her teeth in the scene.
I am the princess. To question my virtue is an act of treason.
Yes, and now by turning the tables on the queen, Rhaenyra has control over the conversation, and she can feed Alicent whatever version of the events that she wants, and Alicent will be forced to at least hear her out. Meanwhile, Daemon takes a very different strategy against the accusations.
She is just a girl. Your niece.
Rhaenyra's a woman grown. Better her first experience be with me than some whore. I want Rhaenyra. I'll take her as she is and wed her in the tradition of our house.
Yeah, so Daemon totally owns it, but he also lies. Just on the other side of the truth, he lies about his impotency. He claims that he fully did the deed. And why? He does it to enrage his brother and to make a power play. Viserys shows Rhaenyra how Aegon's dagger contains glyphs hidden by pyromancers in the Valyrian steel.
From my blood come the prince that was promised, and his will be the song of ice and fire.
This inscription officially merges the two prophecies in Game of Thrones that we all pretty much assumed were referring to the same thing at this point. We learned in episode 1 that the Targaryen belief in the Song of Ice and Fire was something passed down from Targaryen ruler to Targaryen ruler, from Aegon the Conqueror, maybe even before. But the prince that was promised referred to a prophecy from believers in the Lord of Light, Azor Ahai reborn, the wielder of Lightbringer who would vanquish the darkness. Melisandre initially believed it would be Stannis Baratheon, but then when Stannis died, she then thought it was Jon Snow. Meanwhile, Daenerys learned that the High Valyrian word for prince was actually gender neutral and believed that she could be the princess that was promised. Game of Thrones' final season arguably deprioritizes these prophecies. While Jon and Dany were important to the defeat of the White Walkers, Arya cast the killing blow, and neither Jon nor Dany sat on the Iron Throne during this war. So I don't know, maybe George R.R. Martin has different plans for the ending of his A Song of Ice and Fire novels that he's trying to set up in this series. But either way, the description in this dagger proves that the root of those two strands of the same prophecy were really the same. The pyromancers of Valyria and Aegon, his grandfather Aenar the Exile, who was the one who fled Valyria with his family after the dreams of his daughter, Daenerys the Dreamer, and who knows how far back that dagger goes, but wherever it was, that root inspired both the Targaryen bloodline and the followers of this culty religion in Essos. So Rhaenyra ultimately concedes to wed Laenor, but only Viserys removes his hand Otto from the High Council. And since Viserys has been slowly losing his literal hand over these 4 episodes, it seems inevitable that this would happen. Rhaenyra and Daemon were successful in removing their most effective obstacle to the throne, Otto Hightower. But House Hightower's got more tricks up their sleeve, I'm sure. But if the Maesters have been part of a deliberate plot of medical malpractice, we should be concerned about this holy hand grenade of Plan BT that Mellos brings Rhaenyra to prevent a pregnancy from Daemon. But considering Daemon was impotent, Rhaenyra would not need this for Daemon, but what about for Sir Criston? Has her masquerade truly worked if the king still thinks she's sullied herself enough to need this? I think what scares Rhaenyra here is that through her political victory, she has still outed herself as an impure game player, and she no longer has that shield of innocence to hide behind. Thank you so much for supporting these analyses every week. I swear, I really do spend a lot of time watching and rewatching to try to analyze the visuals to give you the best product I can. So the fact that you're so patient with me every week just means the world, and thank you. You can follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter at EA Voss. Follow New Rockstars, subscribe to New Rockstars for more analysis of everything you love. Thanks for watching. Bye.